I am Daniel Lucas and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest, Mr. Aaron Hodges. Mr. Aaron, welcome to Book 101 Review.
Hey, thanks for having me on here. Yeah, it's great to catch up and come on the show.
Yes, and can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Aaron Hodges. I've been writing fantasy and a bit of sci-fi novels for the last almost 10 years now. I've written over 20 books at this point, and this is here to talk to you today about my 25th. I need to add those up. A novel that's coming out in September called Warden's Justice.
Congratulations, and thank you for sharing your talents to the world. What inspired you to become an author?
It was something I've always just enjoyed doing when I was a kid. I wrote stories from primary school, middle school, high school, and eventually I had written a novel during university when I was studying something completely different, science I studied. And during a little bit of a gap year, I polished it up and put it on Amazon, and it sold really well. So I decided to keep doing that, and that was 2015, and I've kept going ever since.
Interesting. Can you tell us about your writing process?
Yeah, so my process, it's taken a while, years to sort of get down how I really process, but I found that I'll usually come up with an idea or a few characters, some sort of story arc. I'll then go and bullet point it in a very detailed manner. I'll write chapters of bullet points until I've written most of the story arc, and then I'll go through and write a very rough first draft, usually sticking more or less to the bullet points. Stuff that towards the end it'll usually divert a little bit, and then once I've gotten to the end of that first draft, I really know where the story is going, what the details are, the world, the characters, the different magic systems, and I'll take all that and refine it into the second draft that I then pass to the editor to make sure everything's looking good, and then the third draft, and then I go over and make sure the sentences are looking good, it flows nicely, that sort of thing. And over 3 to 6 months, that's how I write a book.
Fascinating. So how do you develop your characters and plot lines?
Characters and plot lines, it really depends. Sometimes I have a really good idea of what the main motivation for a character is. It's all about motivations for me, and where they're going in the story. You never want to have a flat character that doesn't do much during the book. You want them to change either for the better or for the worse. Some characters become the bad guy. Some bad guys become the good guy, but you want them changing. And you kind of, their interactions with other characters tell me eventually where their arc is going, where their story is going.
Yes. So what challenges have you faced in your writing career?
You always have up years and down years. Like no one can 100% of the time write a bestseller. So there's years that I've written series that haven't taken off, and other years that they have done well. I've always got my older books that usually have good sales in the background, like the Sword of Light trilogy, The Legend of the Gods, Descendants of the Fall. They're some of my best-selling series. But some other series haven't hit so well. The Alpharian Chronicles, and the Knights of Alana and things like that have done okay, but not as fantastic as some of the other books I've written. So it's a process, and it's hard to continue writing a series that you feel people don't like or don't appreciate. So you want to I always want to find stories that connect with people, that people are interested in, and get them continue to read. And that sort of really worked on this one. I think Kayla's story in this book is very interesting because it's the story of someone that wants to make the world a better place. And she wants to do that by serving as a warrior, as a soldier, and fighting for her people and her kingdom and her the magisterium. But it's not always doing the right thing is not always as simple as that. So that's her story, how she discovers that the world she thought is there is not always the world that's actually there.
Is it a pressure for your tagline that you are best-selling author when you are creating something?
No, not too much. You always want to hit another bestseller, of course, but I have always just written the books and the stories that I want to read myself. So if I'm writing something, I'm enjoying it, I'll keep writing it, and I just have to hope that that's something readers will also enjoy. Sometimes when I try a new genre, I've written a few sci-fis, a few lit RPGs. Sometimes they go well, sometimes I don't, because it's a new genre for me. I know fantasy very well, and I always enjoy my fantasy. So usually I'm fairly confident that my fantasy novels are going to hit their audience exactly the way I feel when I read a fantasy novel. But sci-fi and lit RPG and stuff, I also enjoy those genres, but I don't know them as well, and sometimes I won't hit the tropes of those genres, but I still enjoy the series. My sci-fi, the Evolution Gene is still one of my favorite trilogies, and even if it wasn't my bestseller.
Yes. Because of that, Mr. Aaron, I want to give you a cheering squad because of your being one of the best-selling author. Thank you so much for sharing your talents to the world, as I said. So how do you handle writer's block?
Writer's block's never been too much of a difficulty for me. I like to keep writing, and I have my process. I go to a cafe every morning and go sit down, have a flat white, and then I'll put my headphones in, put my music on, and I will say, today I'm going to write 3,000 words, and I will usually do that. It's just a matter of, like I said with my process earlier, my outline is there, and I can write an outline really easily. Even if it's just bullet points, I might even have a whole conversation through bullet points. But then when I go and write that first draft, then it's really easy to jump onto that and expand on that. And then I can go on and with my second draft and with my whole process, so long as I keep writing. Sometimes if I don't write for a month, it can be a bit hard to get back into things. But generally I don't struggle too much as long as I follow my process with writer's block.
So Warden's Justice, is it a series, a quartet, or a trilogy?
It will probably be a trilogy. I think this is the first of the books. It follows Kayla as she first sets out on her story. It was originally going to be one book that, well, I had to split the book in two. The outline, the bullet points, ended up being almost 100,000 words itself, and usually my books are around about 100,000 words. So I end up splitting that in two. The second book will be something along the lines of Rogue's Gambit, something like that. I haven't quite settled on the title, but it's almost finished as well. I've just got to get the last part of it to the editor. That'll come later, but the Warden's Justice itself, I'm pretty happy with how it came out.
Yes, for sure. So what authors or books have influenced your writing?
Strong mixture. I've always had my old favorites, David Gemmell, who wrote fantastic heroic fantasy. Ian Irvine, an Australian author that he has a great series on just world building. His world and histories are amazing. More recently, Brandon Sanderson is just the king of fantasy at the moment. He's a great author to read. I recommend his books 100%. Very interesting magic systems that he creates.
Mm-hmm. So how do you approach research process to all of your books?
My research process, it's more centers around, rather than researching real world things, because I'm fantasy, and I know a lot of stuff about world building and things from my own career as a geographer and environmental scientist. But for the research for me is all about creating a magic system that works well within the story and makes sense. It's logical, it's not overpowered, and you can't just pull it out of nowhere. So a lot of my focus on research is more around making sure the world that my characters are living in is well grounded, both in terms of magic and history and politics and the little secrets that all the characters keep from each other.
Okay, so what is your favorite book that you have written and why?
I think my favorite book that I've written was probably Oathbreaker. I think it was my seventh book. Was a old series, Legend of the Gods. It's a fantasy series, and it follows a young woman and her brother who are running from the head of the kingdom, and they're being hunted because they have magic. And there's also an old hero that was kicked out of the army because he didn't like what was happening, and they sort of run away together. He ends up getting forced into helping them escape from the Tsar, and the story's about them trying to get away, but there's a lot of magic going on involved, and there's things that aren't quite as they seem, and you kind of get the hint of that as you go through as the reader, and eventually it all winds up into a great big finale that I really think came together well, and it's to date one of my favorite books, and I think one of my most popular books as well because of that.
Mm, for sure, the popular one is your favorite. But before we go on, Mr. Aaron, I just want to shout out my top 5 countries listening to this podcast because I'm number 7 in St. Kitts and Nevis in books, and number 15 in St. Kitts and Nevis in arts. Number 20 in Swaziland, Cote d'Ivoire 48, and Serbia 59. Thank you so much for supporting this podcast. And of course, my geography 101. I learned that, Mr. Aaron, you travel the world. Yeah. Can you be my guest?
Yeah,
Can you be my guest on my geography 101? Because I got number 57 in Morocco, 66 in Russia, 85 in Korea, 안녕하세요, Korea, 155 in Hong Kong, and 49 in Egypt. I would love you to be my guest, and let's talk about the places that you've been through.
yeah, for sure.
For sure, and let's promote your books over there. So, Mr. Aaron, what advice do you have for aspiring writers out there?
Oh, my number one advice for aspiring writers is always to write the book. Seems simple, but it's definitely the hardest thing is actually writing and finishing a book. I recommend just take your idea and write it from the start to the finish. Don't worry about editing. Don't worry about proofreading. Even if you can change things as you go. Don't go back and change things that you would need to change to make sense. Make notes of that and wait until you get to the very end when you've completed the novel, because so often new writers will get halfway or a third of the way or even 3/4 of the way through a book, and they'll go, oh, none of this makes sense. I have to go back and change this, and they'll go back, change it, and then they'll get bored and kind of lost in the editing, and you won't end up finishing the book. That's what happened to me for years before I finally published my first book. I had written it years and years beforehand, and I just never could finish the thing. So that's almost my advice to you authors.
Yes, and stop procrastinating, people. Go, go, go. If you have the passion of writing, write it down and share it to the world. Like Mr. Aaron Hodges, who knows you will be like him, a best-selling author and New York Times. So, how do you balance writing with the other aspect of your life?
So writing's really like my full-on career, my full-time job, so I don't have to worry too much about balance. If anything, I find it much more balanced lifestyle than a regular job. I work 25 to 30 hours a week, and I make sure I get up and, as I said, go to my cafe, get started on the day, and take a break for lunch and gym, and then I do a couple hours in the afternoon, and it's like any other job, really. If the brain isn't working, you got to give it a bit boost up with extra coffee. But just like anything else, you put your hours in and you're working, and it pays off.
Yes, for sure. So, what are some themes of topics or topics that you are passionate about exploring in your writing?
I'm always interested in exploring different things that are going on the world, different ideas of war and love and conflict and freedom and all those sort of things. It's always interesting with fantasy how it all intersects, and I'm always inspired by my own personal life and what's going on in my own personal life or in the world in general. The it's always just what's going on with me in the time and what I feel passionate about at the time I'm writing a book about.
How has your writing evolved over time?
I think it's definitely gotten better. The more I practice, the more definitely my prose has gotten better over the years. Even so, some of my earlier books, I find I was much more descriptive than I am now. Sometimes I go back and I have to add more description, but I also find I've settled into finding my books have a good pace. They carry you on through the story quickly and grab you and hook you in. And that's sort of my trait of that I like about my books is they're very gripping, they're very exciting. They move at pace through the story and relationships develop and the story develops. And that's how I think my writing has really evolved into something that I know what I'm doing and how I want my books to be. And I've now gotten pretty good at that too.
Very well said, Mr. Aaron. And how do you handle feedback or criticism of your work?
Feedback's always valuable. It's important to distinguish between helpful feedback and just feedback that's a bit silly. I've had people tell me that my sci-fi doesn't have the science would never work and things like that, which is fine if you're a biomedical science with a doctorate. I'm sure it doesn't work, but it's sci-fi, so it's something different and interesting. But writing wise, it's not so helpful. Others where maybe someone said that the book was kind of slow in the middle, and yeah, that's true. I need to make sure in the future that the story carries on and that things are continually engaging readers. So it's always just being objective about criticism and what's useful and what's not.
Yes. So, what are some of your goals or aspirations as a writer?
My goals and aspirations. I mean, every writer wants to have a movie or a TV show one day. The have to get pretty big on the publishing scene for that, but you never know. This one's pretty good, I think. So you never know. Always holding out hope for that. I know I have some friends who've got comics done, anime series even. It's always interesting to see what's out there. But for me, I just want to be able to keep writing and enjoying my writing stories that I like and that people like, and being able to live off what I earn from my writing. That's a dream, and I'm living it most of the time.
Yes, for sure. So, how do you think the publishing industry is changing, and what does that mean to the authors?
The industry is always changing. I'm self-published, and you have to stay on top of what's the best way to publish your books. Traditionally, it's been Amazon, Kindle Unlimited, and this book will be launching on Kindle Unlimited, the subscription program where you can read all the books in Amazon for free. However, Amazon does make you have to sell those books only on Amazon free, electronically at least. So that, and lately the platform has been very taken over by advertising, and that's a huge cost for authors. So a lot of us are moving away from the platform now because the profits just aren't there. Amazon's taking more and more for their side, and so I've got most of my books off Amazon. Well, they're on Amazon, but they're not in Kindle Unlimited. They're available everywhere. And 3 years ago, I never thought that would have been profitable. Now it's much more profitable than on Amazon, at least for my older books. And it's so things like that. It's always changing. You got to follow the trends. You got to keep an eye on your profits and how things are working. It's a complete business model rather than just the writing, unfortunately.
Yes, for sure. So, how do you approach writing for different genres or audiences?
As I said, I know the fantasy genre pretty well. I feel to write in other genres, you really have to know them, and to know them, you got to read them. You got to read a ton of them. You got to know what the tropes are, how their plots develop, and what is important. The romance readers have a completely different expectation from fantasy readers, from sci-fi readers, dystopian, lit RPG. It's all got their things that you expect and things that you don't that might not be in what you usually write. So if you're changing genres, you really got to get that research done.
So, what is something you wish you had known when you are first starting to write?
Just that it was just that all the different things you can do in publishing with newsletters and ads and pre-orders, things like that, and how quickly you can write, where to find good cover artists and things like that. All stuff you pick up along the way. Having a newsletter would have been great with my first book, because I kind of lost a lot of the audience from the first book because I didn't have any way to capture them from Amazon's platform. Some of them came back for the second book, but that was 6 months later. So a lot of people move on quickly these days. So if I'd had a newsletter, it might have been a better launch for the second book, but it all worked out in the end.
Yes, but before we go on, Mr. Aaron, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, Food 101, on our fourth season with Chef Alessandro, one of the best executive chef and one of five-star hotel in downtown Toronto. Please do listen to our latest episode. We talk about the top 10 main course of Italian cuisine. Like what? Lasagna, people. So please do listen to our latest episode of all our episodes from season 1 to season 4, Food 101. So, Mr. Aaron, how do you hope your books will be remembered or appreciated by future generations?
I hope people read them. I hope people are still talking about fantasy and hope and things like and magic and having their imagination opened in the future for many generations to come, whether they're reading my books or someone else's, that's fine. But I hope they'll remember mine somewhere in the mix as books that not always a happy ending, but the sometimes for good to win, some sacrifices are needed, and sometimes that happens in my book, sometimes it doesn't.
Yes, and for giving your talents to the world. Again, we're gonna give you a big hand. Thank you so much for your talents, and I hope more selling books to come. So, what is your expectation for Warden's Justice?
Yeah, well, I hope to launch it in early September, maybe even late August if I get through the edits quickly. I hope it is received well, and I'll get the second book out really quickly after that, and we'll see how it goes, and hopefully everyone enjoys it.
Yes, looking forward for those books coming. So, Mr. Aaron, can you please invite our listeners to support all your books?
Yes, you can find all my books on aaronhodgesauthor.com. There's links to all the different series there. I recommend starting with Oathbreaker, Legend of the Gods.
Legends of the God. Can you tell us about the Legend of the Gods? I'm interested to it.
So that's the one I mentioned earlier. It's a sequel series. It's a trilogy. As I said, it follows Alana as she's running with her brother and a ex-soldier who's helping them. And it's set 300 years after my original trilogy. So everything that happens in the first series I ever wrote is legend and tale and history. So you don't need to actually read my first trilogy. And I think it's a good place for people to start because it's some of my better writing and some of my better stories, and it's a really fun book to read along with too.
Fun to read. So are you an architect or a gardener in terms of writing?
Architect and garden. Yeah, it's a bit of mix for me. I like to plot out my stories, but I like to do so free form. I'll just write my bullet points until I run out of time, and then I'll go back and architect them and trim them and get them back together until I've got something nice and finished and come together nicely.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Aaron Hodge, because if you support him, more best-selling books to come. And again, Mr. Aaron, I'm inviting you to come back and let's talk all about your books. Let's feature them, talk them one by one, so that people knows how you crafted them all. So, Mr. Aaron, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here and hope to be back.
More to come, people. See you soon.